Peace and wholeness, family. I'm getting a download about the Roman god Janus, who January is named for, and why we have the Gregorian New Year in January, which doesn't actually make any sense. And I think that the biggest thing to understand from what I'm about to say is that the structures are built to not make any sense. The structures are built to put us at odds of the natural universe, and for us to go against cosmic order, because that ensures self-destruction, and it also ensures that we will get trapped in a karmic cycle. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that I'm getting about this download. But before I go any further, welcome to the Aetherium. This is a spiritual sanctuary where I am pioneering spiritual practice of cosmic wellness, which is grounded upon the shadow work practice of spiritual abolition. It finds itself in decolonial praxis for your liberation and sovereignty. So go ahead and give us a follow on all platforms and consider subscribing to the newsletter on Substack, The Mysteries. That all being said, yeah, so Janus is supposed to be about order and balance. The main thing that I was picking up that I think is really important to comprehend is something that you might really resonate with if you have been following along with our journey talking about Shaitan and the difference between Shaitan and demons in the mysteries. So I also talked about this on Threads. Just given everything that's been going on, I think that I'll probably be leaving Threads. Don't really know where we will take that kind of content next, but I do know that, like, I just don't feel comfortable being on those platforms anymore. So stay tuned and we will have more information about that. But the etymological, I guess, origins of the term shaitan comes from Semitic languages. It's present in Arabic, it's present in Hebrew, it's present in, and that's why shaitan and the bastardization of that word Satan is present in every Abrahamic religion. So we are particularly working with the Islamic translation of shaitan. We do use the Hebrew translation, which is adversary, but we're particularly working with the Islamic framework of the term shaitan, which is to say one that is far from the divine. And the light of the divine. We're talking about the sunlight of the spirit here. And the thing that I was downloading that felt really pertinent and felt like really juicy, I guess you might say, is I saw this video. It was like it was more like a GIF than it was a video, but it was a very brief little video of this lady who was on a reality television show, and she was talking about how she she made a pact with, I guess, the devil. I think that's what she said. And but she couldn't talk about it because if she talked about it, then she made a pact with a demon, and she couldn't talk about it because if she talked about it, then the demon said it would reap her soul and the souls of everyone she loved. And then she joked that that was like really dramatic. And I thought it was funny, of course, but I've also been like, it's been in my consciousness, floating around, clanging around a bunch lately. And this download started coming through, and it had to do with that term, reap their souls. So if you know anything about the Latin language, which I do because I've been studying French on and off since I was 10 years old. Soul means sun, S-O-L, in Latin. and in French. Or soleil is sun in French, but sol means sun in Latin. And that's really close to the word soul, S-U-L, in S-U-S-O-U-L, excuse me, in English, right? No coincidence there. We talk about the divine spark, and in fact, I think in 2001, that was like, or 2021, excuse me, in 2021, that was like the theme of the year was the divine spark and the frequency of joy. So that was really important, and it was coming up a lot. And the divine spark is like a dewdrop of divinity, I like to call it. A dewdrop of divinity that lives within us, each and every single one of us. I want you to think about the planet Earth and what is at the core of the planet Earth. And I'm not talking about what people think is at the core of the planet Earth. What we know in terms of science is at the core. And it is a hot molten center of basically liquid fire, magma, that is at the core of the earth. It's like a little sun inside the earth. And then the earth, the rocks that make up the earth, the different layers of minerals are on top of that. And then we have like oceans and vegetation on the top of the top layer of the earth, correct? So think about it as, I always think about my body as being a little earth. Think about your soul as a little sun inside of you. And if you're at all familiar with Christianity, I mean, you know that Yeshua was called the Son of God, and there's a lot of sun imagery, and a lot of people say that, you know, and including my teacher, 𝗂𝗨, who was initiated into 𝗂𝗶𝗱 by the priest 𝗂𝗨𝗧 from Ghana. We talk about the Bible being allegorical in some respect. It's actually historical as well, but it is also allegorical, and it is coded because it is a grimoire for a specific bloodline lineage. And you don't know who is part of that bloodline lineage just by looking at them. You're not going to be, oh, everybody who has red hair, everybody who's black. No, that's not how you'll know who's part of the lineage, because guess what? That's just not like how anthropology and the spread of human genetics over the planet works, especially in 2024 when we have a globalized society. So, oh my gosh, I collected some snow, and it's like, it was a lot of snow, but it's the tiniest amount of like snow water. That's hilarious. But anyway, the sun, we are all children of God, and it's not about like being a son or a daughter, S-O-N, son or a daughter. It's about being a child, and it's about like having that dewdrop of divinity. One of my childhood best friends' mom used to call it a God nugget. And it's it's essentially like the earth's magma core. And imagining that as like something that came from the sun, a little piece of the sun breaking off and becoming the core of the earth, and then the rest of the earth like cooling and being that. Imagine it like that. So you have a little bit of power from the sun, not all of the sun. You are not the sun, but you have a little bit of power from the sun, okay? If we didn't have the sun, we wouldn't exist. If we didn't have the earth, if we didn't have the water, like we wouldn't exist, not the way that we do. So people say that the Bible is actually allegorical for astrology. And I would also then say that astrology in and of itself, like is allegorical. Whatever system you're using is in its own way allegorical to understanding cosmic energy, because when you look at the constellations, yeah, if somebody tells you, oh, that's a ram, you can maybe figure out that, oh, I could see how that could be a ram. But where else in the cosmos do we know that there are rams? That's a completely human conception. And if there are human beings in different places on the planet where there are never any rams and there never were, then why would they think that that's a ram? So astrology in and of itself, that is a human technological framework used to understand and rather comprehend the world in which we live, and not just do we live in it, we are part of it. So understanding and understanding and maybe one day overstanding our world, our universe, our existence through the lens of being an earthling, not just an earthbound being, but having been born from the earth. Okay, so that is all to say that in and of itself, astrology is allegorical, which is why we have different like systems across the planet. Instead of trying to rush, I know that like people on 11:11, people will tell you like, oh my God, you have to like be quick and get your message out there in this amount of time, 3 minutes, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what we're doing this year. And that's not how magic, I don't want to do that with like magic and in this sacred wisdom. I'm not going to rush through it. So just respecting the message that I'm downloading and pulling the thread as it comes along, instead of trying to force it to do things or be something that it's not. So yeah, we've got this little bit of firepower in us that is divine, that is sacred, and we're talking about the sun, which gives us life. And we can think of as, I mean, I think people think of it as like father, sun, and mother moon. But we also know that people say that the Bible is an adaptation of, I think, Amun-Ra in Egyptian lore. And, you know, basically what we're talking about is the journey of the sun. When you look at astrology, when you look at Leo and think about the correlation that Leo and the fifth house, which is ruled by Leo, and the sun they definitely relate to royalty, and they definitely relate to children and creativity. Our creative power is what makes us the rulers of the 3D, allegedly. But if you're trapped in the 3D, if you're trapped in the matrix, and at any capacity, whether 2D or 3D, if you're trapped in the matrix, you're not sovereign, and you're not the royalty of, I mean, you could be born into a bloodline that is royal, but you know, you're not operating from that consciousness. And that's the crown. When we are crowned, our crown chakra, Sahasrara. Not exactly remembering the Sanskrit right now, but you get the point. The 1,000-petal lotus that sits atop our head and coming into bloom. Thinking about where lotuses bloom in the mud, right? And so this is about blooming where you are. And also understanding, comprehending that sometimes the conditions are simply not, what is the word that's coming through? I mean, I can say generative, but there's a different word that's coming up. Hospitable to the blooming, you know what I mean? And so sometimes people will say to you like, oh, bloom where you are. I'm seeing, like, I literally saw somebody had like a poster about this, and someone else said, which I agree with, like, no, sometimes you got to get up out of that situation and go somewhere else to bloom. So perhaps some of you who come across this media will relate to that idea of like maybe trying to make it work in a situation, whether this is an interpersonal relationship. I feel like some of you, it's like a romantic relationship, and I'm also being shown like a child. Like maybe you're trying to work with to make a romantic relationship work with the parent of your child because of the child, but I can guarantee you, I don't know any I don't know anyone who's actually been raised in a situation like that who is grateful for that. Like, my parents are divorced. They've been separated since I was 4, and I thank God every day because I would not have wanted to grow up in an environment where the two of them were together. My cousin, their parents stayed together until all of the kids had graduated high school, but they could not stand each other, and then they got divorced. And my cousin, who was the oldest of her siblings, really was just like, I wish that they would just get divorced already. Because who wants to live around that kind of like energy? Nobody. It's actually not good to show people that like to live that as an example for children, that they should just like force themselves to make something. Well, it's not going to work, so I don't even think that that's the rhetoric for it. But um, so some of you, that's the permission that you need to like leave that situation. It will probably be a lot better for the child to grow up not around that kind of friction and chaos. But then, of course, oftentimes it's like trying to stay in a job that isn't working. I can super relate to that. And they're showing me like my experience of like trying to stay in a job and trying to stay in a city that was not working for me. And it, trigger warning, it caused me so much SI. And I really did not want to like feel like I was being irresponsible by leaving those things when I did, but I simply had to follow my guidance. My ancestors would not let me rest until I put my 2 weeks notice in and until I confirmed to my leasing office that I was not going to be renewing my lease. Like, they would not let me rest. So yeah, the thing that I think is like really important to understand here is that change is inevitable, and let go or be dragged. If you know that you're being called away from something to something else, you need to trust that. And I know that that can be really hard sometimes, especially if like you feel like you've been burned by trusting that in the past, trusting that instinct and trusting that intuition. But I want you to understand, I love the quote from a song by a rapper, and he said, "You can live through anything if magic made it." And the reality is, like, when you have to walk through your karma, whether that's your karma that you personally created in this life or the past life, or it's karma that you took on when you incarnated into a family, into a bloodline, into a tribe, and like a culture, you know what I mean? Or karma that you're taking on by being in proximity to something or someone, that, you know, if you know that you're trusting your guidance, if you know that you're walking by the light of the sunlight of the spirit, if you know that you are moving by your intuition and trusting your heart and trusting your gut and trusting when all of these things are aligned, because you can't trust just one of them when it's out of sync with the others. Your whole chakra system needs to be in alignment for you to be able to trust all of them. So you can't always trust your gut, especially if you have CPTSD. You cannot always trust your gut. You can't always trust your heart. Not if you are codependent. You can't always trust your mind. Not if you've gone through the indoctrination into the colony. So, trusting one of those things. And also, like, sometimes our bodies, I'm thinking of the root chakra, sometimes the Muladhara or Dara, but sometimes our bodies tell us that we're in danger when we're not. Because obviously the architects of the DSC, the colony, knew how to exploit our reptilian brain Some psychologists refer to it as our lizard brain, but I'm talking about the basal ganglia, the base of our skull, where our skull meets our spine. That is called the basal ganglia. It is also called the reptilian brain, and that is where the information of millennia of human development is stored. That is our primal instinct. That is where survival is coded. Our frontal lobe is our sophisticated mind. And when we are operating from fear, perhaps because we grew up in an environment in which we had to always be fearful, we get stuck there, we get trapped there, and getting trapped there perpetuates karma. It creates the same situation. It's Groundhog Day over and over and over again. And so what I'm picking up is MLCH. We don't say that entity's name in the Aetherium because we don't call that energy into this space, but MLCH is connected to this god Janus. And in fact, what I think may have happened is they replaced Janus with MLCH. So yeah, and this idea of reaping souls. Janus relates to change. I said that, and to order. It relates to transition. So you might think of this as Pluto. You might think of this as very Plutonic, but this is like this Janus being transitions, beginnings, endings, and duality. Honestly, this kind of reminds me of 𝗂𝗪𝘁 or 𝗂𝗪𝘁, and it reminds me because yeah, the gateway, the threshold. So the thing about it is people think that there's only 12 signs. That's true. There are only 12 signs because it's 0 through 12. Pisces is not 1, or Pisces is not 12. Pisces is 0. Okay? Aquarius is actually 12. And that is because they took out the sign 𝗂𝗪𝘁, which comes between Sagittarius and Scorpio. So it's the 10th sign. It's not the 13th sign, it's the 10th. And that is completion. That is actually death. That's Samael. Something that I noticed when I was listening to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy the other day is that on Devil in a New Dress, Rick Ross, and I have so many downloads that I need to pick apart about listening to that song with the context that we have in today's modern era of 2024. That song came out when I was in, that album came out when I was, I think, a junior in high school. So Samael is the angel of death. The angel of death, we also can think of other death deities, and oftentimes they're women, but sometimes they're men. This is also the crossroads. If we're talking about transitions, beginnings, endings, duality, we're talking about the crossroads. And I want to say something. Sodom and Gomorrah, which was my favorite story growing up, is my favorite story. When I was bored at church, which I often was, I would read that story. Lot's wife is told not to look back, elsewise she will become a pillar of salt. And she did look back. She did look back. And she became a pillar of salt. And I think it's just, whenever I think about that, I think about how, I don't know if this is true in other parts of America. I think that it is. But when I was a teenager, people used to say that people were being salty. And it basically meant the same thing as like being bitter. Like, oh, why are you being so salty? You know what I mean? And it was like, it's essentially the same as being bitter. So Lot's wife looking back on, it's Sodom and Gomorrah, but like what I'm picking up is like Babylon. So as we are progressing out of the past, the chaos of the past, specifically old Earth, and as we are progressing out of the false matrix, as we are progressing out of our, out of the indoctrination, and we are being reborn into our sovereignty, it's easy when we're in the process of distillation, and we're in the process of being purified and purged of the old. That's what happens when we get through Ophiuchus, through Pisces. And I'm talking, think about the constellations. This is why we're using true sidereal astrology moving forward in the Aetherium, okay? So think about the constellations. We get through the portal of Ophiuchus, and people are like, it's not a sign, it's a portal. Okay, well, that's true for Pisces as well. Pisces is not a sign, it's a portal. And they're like, oh, well, Ophiuchus, those are dead stars, because that is the portal of death, ruled by 𝗪𝗵𝗻. 𝗪𝗵𝗻 keeps that portal, right? And when we go through that portal, we come into Scorpio, we come into, excuse me, it goes Scorpio and then Sag. So it's not, it's, Scorpio's the 8th sign, so it's the 9th sign, and then Sag would be the 10th sign, Capricorn would be the 11th, Aquarius would be the 12th, and then Pisces is 0, because 0 is not a number, but 0 is an integer. 0 holds the infinite. So these two that are being discounted are Ophiuchus and the full wisdom of Pisces. Pisces represents Christ. It's represented by a fish, right? And what was the symbol of the early Christians before it became the institution of the church, which is not what we're talking about. The people who actually followed Yeshua, his actual crew of light workers, the fish, that's Pisces. But what did they do? They separated the divine masculine from the divine feminine in order to bastardize his teaching and the doctrine and the good grimoire, right? So that's 𝗪𝗵𝗄. Divine masculine is divine masculine Christ, divine feminine Christ, 𝗪𝗵𝗄, the wisdom, the infinite wisdom, and cutting out the sacred feminine, taking God, the Father, away from the sacred feminine. People don't realize actually that the Holy Spirit is the divine feminine, Shekinah. And then like the 𝗂𝗂𝗄𝗽 of Christ, not Yeshua himself, but Christ Yeshua of Christ is the divine masculine. 𝗪𝗵𝗄 is the divine feminine. And they took those away. And what they did was they replaced the angel of death, Samael, with MLCH. And they've been reaping souls through, I mean, the biggest thing to understand about why they would have the new year start in the season of death is because I would say to dysregulate us, to take us away from, I don't know if I said this before because I started this reading multiple times and then I stopped, but is to take us away from the natural cosmic order of things so that we can continue accruing karma and stay stuck in incarnating in the 3D because we are karmically trapped. And this is the reaping of the souls, because whatever they're feeding, which is MLCH, they're not letting people get to that threshold. They're not letting people actually transform. And my friend made a very good point that they downloaded that they're keeping people from going through the true 𝗂𝗪𝗁𝘁 initiation, which is the shadow work aspect of things. That's why people are like, oh my God, love and light. And it's just like, when I hear people with that toxic positivity shit, like that love and light shit, like, you're not a real one. You're a fucking op. And I don't want to hear anything that comes out of your mouth. I don't even want you near me because you're spiritually diseased. Okay, so that love and light shit, that's very clear indicator that somebody is not on the team of the living. They are being controlled. Their mind, it's mind control. Okay, so people are not being able to come into 𝗂𝗪𝗁𝘁 initiation to transmute and shadow work their karma so that they can come out on the other side with their spiritual wisdom spiritually mature, spiritually evolve, emotionally, mentally evolve, grow up, you understand? Or you understand, and progress so that they can finally level up out of the toxic cesspool, the doldrums, the pit of despair. And I'm hearing the pit as in the one of the circles of hell pit. And you want to think about the circles of hell, because do remember that everything that's like in the Bible is contextualized by the history of where they were. Literally, the literal history of where they were in the world at the time that they were there. And understand that, you know, and understanding also that, like, the idea of the different circles of hell that Milton wrote about, I guess he was Roman Catholic probably, or was writing from this perspective of Roman Catholicism, but it's Roman. And the underworld did have different dimensions, and Tartarus is the pit, right? So this being is reaping souls, eating people's souls, the people's sun, the sunlight of the spirit. And that's why they're living in darkness. But those people who have championed death, it's not about like, oh, I beat death, I live forever. No, you see that vampires are cursed to live forever. And there are many very valid reasons why that would be a curse. Beating death means that, like, you went through the dark night of the soul. You met your shadow, your deepest fears, and you faced them, and you kept facing them, and you came out on the other side triumphant. This comes back to the idea of leaving, of finally just putting down what's not working. You know what I mean? So many people, and I say this with grace, compassion, and empathy because I'm sober. I've been sober for 4.5 years. I haven't drank in almost exactly 6 years. Next week will be 6 years exactly to the day. And I don't do that anymore. I also, yeah, I feel like I can say at this point I quit smoking cigarettes, and yeah, I don't want to go back to doing any of those things. I'm cutting down on how much sugar I eat. Yeah, I'm aging, but also because it makes me feel bad. The way that I felt when I smoked cigarettes made me feel bad. And also, I don't want to be addicted to anything. I don't want to be forced to do things that I don't want to do. You know what I mean? Quitting caffeine, for instance, like going so far in my relationship with caffeine till the point that I cross the line, and if I don't have it, I start to have a headache and feel disoriented. That's addiction. And I have to wean myself off of that because I don't ever want to feel enslaved to anything, least of all anything outside of me. Some of you, many if not all, I think this is true all the time. Anything that is showing up in as your life, it's really about a dynamic and a way of thinking and being that we are addicted to. So I brought up the thing about being sober in recovery because so many people are just so delusional about their relationship to substances. And it's just like, oh, like, no, I can get a grip on it, or like, it's fine. But then are like really unhappy in their lives and just never could think like, oh, maybe it's that thing. Maybe I just try not doing that thing. There are a lot of reasons for this, including sociological, like, indoctrination and the media and the way that, like, the media and the culture of America, particularly. And if you're not in America, the culture of the West. And also, I think this is like global, to be honest. Culture pushes us to think that it's normal to drink and it's abnormal not to, or it's normal to inebriate, to intoxicate, and it's abnormal not to. And in reality, that's insane. And this is the same insanity that I'm talking about, that puts us against the natural order of things, that turns us against the earth, that turns us against our bodies. You know what I mean? It's one thing to have a little vice every once in a while, eat a piece of chocolate every once in a while, but to compulsively use things outside of ourselves and not be able to recognize the ways in which it's harming us and keeping us from achieving our goals and our dreams. If you are still not achieving your goals and your dreams, you got to look at your life and figure out, okay, like, what is the relationship to this? How is it affecting me in relation to my goals and my dreams? You know what I mean? And so this is not something that most people can do. And this is indicative of one, codependency, but two, that's a dynamic, right? This dependency on something outside of ourselves. People who have certain behaviors and certain ways of engaging with others, you know, that is a coping mechanism that's maladaptive if it's causing harm. And these are things that like we get encouraged to let go of, but because we're so afraid of change, you might be clinging to codependency. You might be clinging to passive aggression. You might be clinging to drinking too much or drinking at all. You know what I mean? I know somebody who apparently, allegedly, this is what they said, if they ever eat meat again, they could die. I actually believe it because she's a very sickly person. And like, imagine if she just like kept eating meat, like how Amy Winehouse kept having seizures from her drinking. And she knew, they told her, like, if you drink, you really could have, like, you could die. She wanted to die, and so she drank again. She couldn't stop herself. Even if she wanted to live, she couldn't stop herself. She'd gone too far. Knowing that you could die. I know somebody else who knows that they have blood and liver issues. If they drink, it could kill them. It could catalyze their death. And they can't stop. They won't stop. And yet other people are not telling them, hey, man, I think you have a problem. I think you need help. So I don't want to say that this all exists in a vacuum. These things are all connected. These kinds of issues are bigger than just ourselves. They're bigger than just us. But I do want to say that, like, it could be eating too many Oreos all the time, eating too much cake. Like I said, sweets, having too much, like fornicating too much. You know what I mean? People who are addicted to love, hoarders. Yeah, you might be like, oh, what's wrong with like having so much stuff? People die inside of their shit that they've been hoarding. People have, it causes disease, and also hoarding can, houses can set on fire, and they do. People die in their homes that they've been hoarding because they can't even get out. So it's serious. You know what I mean? And it also doesn't need to get to the point of like, uh-oh, I'm going to die if I don't stop. Like that, you've gone far too far. We can say stop a lot sooner than being at like the most dire point in our relationship, or in our journey with this thing. Okay, when I quit smoking weed, well, I'll just say ingesting cannabis, because I was also eating a lot of edibles and I was making a lot of edibles. And it wasn't as if I knew I was going past what I should be doing, but it wasn't to the point of like, it wasn't ruining my life. You know what I mean? It wasn't ruining my life, but I was becoming someone that I didn't like. I didn't want to be. And it was getting in the way of me doing certain things, and showing up for certain things. And now that it's been 4.5 years, I can honestly say that like I would never want to go back to living at the capacity that I was able to hold for my greatness, for my power, for the sunlight of my spirit, as when I was back then. That's just me though. I really don't. It's whatever your relationship is to whatever it is that you have a dependency on and need to let go of. Here's your invitation to do it. Whatever is coming up in your head, in your heart, what your spirit, what your subconscious is presenting to you as you listen to these words, as you hear these words. That is what it is you need to let go of. And don't sit here and be like making up excuses for why you can't do it, because I'm telling you right now, you're going to look back. If you don't, you're going to look back and you're going to remember that you knew better and you still didn't do better, and that it's on you now. I promise you that. I promise you that. You will not forget this moment. It's on you now, because now you know better. It's time to do better. You feel me? So people are getting trapped and their souls are being reaped. Their sun, the sunlight of the spirit. Because what happens? Oh, I don't know if I talked about the mysteries newsletter yet, because like I said, I stopped and started this channeling multiple times, but I was talking about shaitan and the etymological origins of the term shaitan, and it meaning one who is far from the divine, the sunlight of the spirit. And when you lose rank, the higher ranking you are, let's think about the system of angels. Remember that angels are just the deities of Abrahamic religion. So thinking about the rankings of the angels, there are different tiers of angels, right? And we have the seraphim being the highest tier. We have cherubim. We have, we do apparently have Ophanim. We have powers and principalities, and we just have like, I think that there are nine tiers, three different types within three different tiers. So they're ranked differently. And the higher ranking ones reach up to higher dimensions of consciousness. And when you lose rank, you don't suddenly forget the experience of existing at that consciousness, but you lose the ability to access that consciousness. And that is hell. That is hell. Hell is an experience. It's not a place. It's an experience. It's a way of being, and it's a dimensional reality. But people think about places in terms of the 3D. We have to stop thinking about that, because the 3D is one dimension out of infinite dimensions. You know what I mean? So here's a perfect time for me to plug my Science is Cool playlist, where you can watch videos that I found to be very helpful for understanding and understanding. Although I don't know if as humans we'll ever really be able to understand quantum physics and the physical, mathematical, and scientific reality of the universe that we are. That we are, because we are a universe unto ourselves. And I remember a spiritualist saying that every dimension is a universe, and that also makes sense to me. But yeah, so what I'm trying to communicate here, what I am communicating here rather, is that, you know, we talk about the fallen ones. And the fallen ones lost rank, and they were cast out of heaven. They were cast out down to the second, well, I guess they were cast down to the third dimension. And then they fell from the third dimension down to the second dimension, so on and so forth. And MLCH, and that's why IBLS, who's also AZZL. We talked about this on Threads the other day, but we didn't talk about this in, I meant to send out something for the newsletter saying that, to check that out, because it's a really, really powerful message that I downloaded whilst doing the astrology. But, yeah, IBLS, Shaitan, they're not demons. Demons are they're higher ranking. Shaitan are just jinn. They're the non-believing jinn. They're just spirits. You know what I mean? And they are lower because they are following a fallen one. And they're doing the bidding of a fallen one. So they're also losing weight because jinn, just because they live in the unseen doesn't mean that they're bad. And jinn are fae energies, as they call it in, my teacher calls it in their culture. The fae, the fairy of the earth, or the fairy of the land, elemental spirits, those are jinn. And not all of them are bad. Not all of them are good, but you have to be discerning. You have to have discernment to be able to know which ones you trust and which ones you don't. The 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗪 spirits. And I do want to say that I definitely feel like there's a lot of that energy of trying to like, it's dissipating. Yeah, just be mindful about like people, places, and things, including energies, entities, and expressions of existence that are trying to confuse you. Because that's the trickster spirit. And the thing about MLCH is it's a trickster. It reminds me of the symbol for shield. Is it shield from X-Men? No. I'm trying to remember who has that Hydra symbol. Oh, it's Hydra. Ugh, God. Fuck. Hydra. Okay, let's read together. Hydra was an international espionage organization set on wanting world domination. It is the rival agency of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the reason for X-23's existence. They were eventually taken down by Logan, that's Wolverine, and his clone daughter once Viper disappeared. Hydra was left without a leader, though it is unknown if any took over the role and brought the organization back in the future. Okay. And they constantly try to fight with the X-Men. And they constantly go up against S.H.I.E.L.D. And I want you to go and I want you to look at the image of Hydra. And it really reminds me of Davy Jones. And I was thinking about Davy Jones, and his job was to ferry the souls of the dead who died at sea. And then after 10 years, he would be connected with his wife, Calypso, who at that time was in a human form as 𝗂𝗪𝗪, the witch. But he was mad. He abandoned his post because he was mad that when they were supposed to meet, she never showed up. And he cut out his heart because he was so heartbroken. And then he just began terrorizing the seas and became a monster. And remember what he's integrated with, that is referred to as the king of the marine. I don't like that though. I don't think it is. And it is a mind control entity. So they said that who controlled the heart controlled Davy Jones, and who controlled the heart controlled the seas. I think that's like really important. I've been downloading that for a little while as well, and just slowing down to clarify what this download is about. although the solar plexus is like located around the gut, that sunlight of the spirit actually is your heart chakra. And that's why they try to get us to turn off our heart chakra. That's why they talk about, like, I will give you a brand new heart when the heart is made of stone. I'm going to look up that. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. So, Earth Angel gang, you may identify as an Earth Angel. And if you do, that means that you're a deity on Earth. Just FYI. It's time to put aside the old way, because Isaiah 43:19, see, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Okay, we're going to go from 16 through 19. This is what the Lord says. They who made, and I didn't have time to decolonize this yet, so bear with me. He who made a way through the sea, a path through the mighty waters, who drew out the chariots and horses, the army and reinforcements together, and they lay there, never to rise again, extinguished, snuffed out like a wick. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. The wild animals honor me, the jackals and the owls, because I provide water in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland, to give drink to my people, my chosen, the people I formed for myself, that they may proclaim my praise. Yet you have not called upon me, Jacob. You have not wearied yourself for me, Israel. You have not brought me sheep for burnt offerings, nor honored me with your sacrifices. I have not burdened you with grain offerings, nor wearied you with demands for incense. You have not bought any fragrant calamus for me, or lavished on me the fat of your sacrifices, but you have burdened me with your sins and wearied me with your offenses. I, even I, am he who blots out your transgressions for my own sake, and remembers your sins no more. Review the past for me. Let us argue the matter together. State the case for your innocence. Your first father sinned. Those I sent to teach you rebelled against me. So I disgraced the dignitaries of your temple. I consigned Jacob to destruction and Israel to scorn. I am going to... For your sake, I will send to Babylon. This is what the Lord says, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. For your sake, I will send to Babylon and bring down as fugitives all the Babylonians in the ships in which they took pride. I'm the Lord, your Holy One, Israel's Creator, your King. I'm going to decode this for the mysteries, the premium tier of the mysteries. Our Substack newsletter. I'm not going to decode it right now. This is a lot, and I'm also sleepy, and I would like to go to sleep. But what I will, I guess, wrap up by saying is, remember the part about the new heart and a new thing being done, and also, ask for help. Get into your practice and supplicate the Most High. However that looks for you is what you're gonna do. I know what that looks like for me. I am of the lineage that the good grimoire works for me as like a book of shadows. But if you're not, then I think that you need to just adapt adapt it to what makes sense for you. And once I decode it, that should be easier to do. But yeah, I think that like 444 and then 5445, I think that the most important thing that is coming up for me is that it's about transformation, and it's about being grateful for the journey. And the if you can be grateful for the journey, because for some of us the journey fucking sucks. It sucks, and that's just true. And it's not going to help anyone to sit around lying about that, deluding ourselves that like, oh, I'm having a great time when I'm not. Like, if I can't see the reality for what it is, then I will never be able to figure out an actual solution. If you know that you have a disease, but you pretend that you don't have a disease, then the disease is just going to keep getting worse. But if you have a disease and you actually are like, uh-oh, I have a disease, you can figure out a solution. Of course, maybe you don't. Maybe you just have that disease. That happens sometimes. But, you know, for a lot of diseases, there is a cure. And as they say, you know, with vaccines, or with like poisons and antidotes and stuff, like the antidote is found in the poison. But if you're not even willing to acknowledge that there's poison, you're not going to find the antidote. And that is sealing your own death sentence. That is ensuring your own suffering. And yeah, then it's you whose soul gets reaped. They're eating the souls because these beings cannot create on their own. They're not creators. They're not capable of doing that. You know what I mean? They're barren. They're succubi. They're parasites. They have to feed on others. Think about it. Like vampires. Vampires are the quote unquote living dead. They don't have blood to enliven them. They have to drink the blood of other beings in order to be enlivened. You know what I mean? In order for their physical systems to work, they need to drink other people's blood. What's in the blood? The blood is related to water esoterically, right? What's in the blood? Information. Your DNA is in your blood. Blood is really important, and you need to be very careful who you let have access to your blood. And you need to be very careful who you let have access to your DNA. I made a TikTok about this last April. People want to joke, you know what I mean? People want to play around and act like shit is sweet. It's not a game out here. You want to be very mindful about who you let have access to your DNA. If you were born in a hospital, oops, I'm getting another download because I was going to say, if you were born in a hospital and you're worried about doing like a blood test to like find out your genetic heritage or whatever, I was going to say they already have your blood. But actually, when we go through these transformations, our DNA is changing, and that can be like monitored. Just as I've said, like, you know, epigenetic trauma, our DNA can change from trauma, but it can also be healed. It can change from healing. Okay. So I guess final messages, Spirit. Don't allow yourself to get trapped in the darkness. Don't allow yourself to get trapped and that's the thing, is that they want to have us so busy, like, oh my God, like it's a new year, better get busy doing this thing. No, we need to be giving ourselves over to the creative process internally, because this is the season of the crone, la hustera, right? I wrote about this on the Substack, so go read it. There's a full one for free subscribers. If you're not if you're not ready to subscribe to the premium tier, but you may also try out the 7-day free trial and see the difference between the premium tier and the free tier. and see if it seems worth it to you. It's $11.11. And honestly, like, some of you, I have read for so many people in my life, and some of you don't know what's going on in your life because you don't know what's going on in the cosmos. If you're a highly sensitive person, if you're an earth angel, if you're an ethereal being, if, you know, a witch, whatever, and you're not aware of the astrology, not just for the month or not just for the big transits, but like every day's astrology and how it interacts with you personally, you're screwing yourself. And it's a form of self-sabotage. I cannot emphasize enough how much astrology has helped me manage my mental health and better under and understand myself and overstand myself. And this is why I advocate for everybody creating a book of shadows to track your cycles in relation to the cycles of the natural world. I know for me, as a Sagittarius sun in tropical astrology, Scorpio and Ophiuchus in sidereal astrology, I when it's Cancer, when the moon is in Cancer, I am in bed, cozy, sleepy, nostalgic, a little sad, you know? But I also know that, okay, this is how I feel right now, but in 2 to 3 days, I will not feel this way. And inevitably, 2 to 3 days passes, the moon moves into Leo, and I'm back outside. They're gonna make me mad again, back outside. But that's my experience. You have to know for yourself what your experience is. And this is why we have to take our power into our own hands. So, you know, pushing ourselves to work to a degree that is unsustainable given the season is not a good idea. It's not a good idea. But you know what is a good idea? Resting. You know, lay down and meditate, or just like bypass your conscious mind and allow the flow of your subconscious to just do its thing, and dump out all of the spiritual detritus and the baggage that is not serving you from the past year or years or lifetimes, whatever's ready to be let go of. And you know, whatever it looks like in your practice, if you're praying and being like, God, help me to let go of this, or if you're making offerings, or if you're whatever you're doing. I think it's so funny that as I have like an altar and practice, I have my practice, it looks way more like what it's supposed to look like according to the good grimoire than what certain people in certain institutions think that they're doing. It's just so hypocritical. But anyway, no need to get all deep in that. Right now is the perfect time to be doing the deep shadow work. And I know that some of us experience seasonal depression, but listen, we're in the depths. We're in the great game now. We're in the depths, and of course you're gonna feel a little bit depressed when we're in the depths and we're in the dark. That's where we are, period. Okay, so show up for that. Do what you got to do instead of bemoaning and decrying, you know, support yourself through this process of transmutation, deep shadow work, and just let it all go. All right. I hope that was helpful. Don't let your soul get reaped. It reminds me of the gut grinder from Adventure Time. Don't let your gut get ground. Don't let your soul get reaped. You stay in possession of your soul, your solar power. This is why a lot of people are tired all the time, is because they're not solar powered. They're powered by demonic ideations from the false shadow and for the false matrix, because that's where they're trapped. And sometimes you also have to realize, like, those who are trapped in the matrix, as we're going through this separation from old earth to new earth, just let them be trapped in the matrix, okay? You cannot save them, and honestly, it is a trap for you to get stuck. Let it go. Let them go. They have a higher power that's going to take care of them, and you just like connect to your higher power as much and as often as you possibly can. So that's all that I have for you. I love you all truly and deeply. I hope that this was nourishing, helpful, and fulfilling, and happy hunting.